Herbert Maleficent was the worst sort of bully, the sort who didn't just hit you and stick your head down the lavatory, but made it his business to find out all your secrets and the things that upset you most and taunt you with them. He enjoyed picking on Tom, who was small and shy and had no friends to stick up for him. And Tom could not get back at him, because Maleficent's family had paid to make him a first-class apprentice, while Tom, who had no family, was a mere third. He knew Maleficent was only bothering to talk to him because he was hoping to impress a pretty young historian named Clytie Potts, who was standing just behind. Tom nodded and turned his back, concentrating on the chase. "Look!" shouted Clytie Potts. The gap between London and its prey was narrowing fast, and a dark shape had lifted clear of Salt Hook. Soon there was another and another. Airships. The crowds on London's observation platforms cheered, and Maleficent said, "Ah! Air merchants. They know the town is doomed, you see. So they are making sure they get away before we eat it. If they don't, we can claim their cargoes along with everything else aboard." Tom was glad to see that Clytie Potts looked thoroughly bored by Maleficent. She was a year above him and must already know this stuff, because she had passed her guild exams and had the historian's mark tattooed on her forehead. "Look," she said, again, catching Tom's glance and grinning. "Oh, look at them go. Aren't they beautiful?" Tom pushed his untidy hair out of his eyes and watched as the airships rose up and vanished into the slate-gray clouds. For a moment he found himself longing to go with them, up into the sunlight. If only his poor parents had not left him to the care of the guild, to be trained as a historian. He wished he could be cabin boy aboard a sky clipper and see all the cities of the world. Puerto Angeles adrift on the blue Pacific, and Archangel skating on iron runners across the frozen northern seas, the great ziggurat towns of the Nuevo Mayans, and the unmoving strongholds of the Anti-Traction League. But that was just a daydream, better saved for some dull museum afternoon. A fresh outbreak of cheering warned him that the chase was nearing its end, and he forgot the airships and turned his attention back to Salt Hook. The little town was so close that he could see the ant-like shapes of people running about on its upper tiers. How frightened they must be, with London bearing down on them, and nowhere to hide. But he knew he mustn't feel sorry for them. It was natural that cities ate towns, just as the towns ate smaller towns, and smaller towns snapped up the miserable static settlements. That was municipal Darwinism, and it was the way the world had worked for 1,000 years. Ever since the great engineer Nicholas Quirk had turned London to the first traction city. "London! London!" Tom shouted, adding his voice to the cheers and shouts of everybody else on the platform. And a moment later, they were rewarded by the sight of one of Salt Hook's wheels breaking loose. The town slewed to a halt, smokestacks snapping off and crashing down to the panicked streets, and then London's lower tiers blocked it from view, and Tom felt the deck plates shiver as the city's huge hydraulic jaws came slamming shut. There was frantic cheering from observation platforms all over the city. Loudspeakers on the tier support pillars started to play London Pride, and somebody Tom had never seen before tugged him tight and shouted in his ear, "A catch! A catch!" He didn't mind. At that moment, he loved everybody on the platform, even Maleficent. "A catch!" he yelled back, struggling free, and felt the deck plates trembling again. Somewhere below him, the city's great steel teeth were gripping Salt Hook, lifting it and dragging it backward into the gut. "And perhaps Apprentice Natsworthy would like to come as well," Clytie Potts was saying. Tom had no idea what she was talking about, but as he turned, she touched his arm and smiled. "There'll be celebrations in Kensington Gardens tonight," she explained. "Dancing and fireworks. Do you want to come?" People didn't usually invite third-class apprentices to parties, especially not people as pretty and popular as Clytie, and Tom wondered at first if she was making fun of him. But Maleficent obviously didn't think so, for he tugged her away and said, "We don't want Natsworthy's sort there." "Why not?" asked the girl. "Well, you know," huffed Maleficent, his square face turning almost as red as Mr. Pomeroy's. "He's just a third, a skivvy. He'll never get his guild mark. He'll just end up as a curator's assistant. Won't you, Natsworthy?" he asked, leering at Tom. "It's a pity your dad didn't leave you enough money for a proper apprenticeship." "That's none of your business," shouted Tom angrily. His elation at the catch had evaporated, and he was on edge again, wondering what punishments would be in store when Pomeroy found out that he had snuck away. He was in no mood for Maleficent's taunts. Still, that's what comes of living in a slum on the lower tiers, I suppose, smirked Maleficent, turning back to Clytie Potts. Natsworthy's mom and dad lived down in 4, see? And when the big tilt happened, they both got squashed flat as a couple of raspberry pancakes. Splat! Tom didn't mean to hit him. It just happened. Before he knew what he was doing, his hand had curled into a tight fist and he lashed out. Ow! Wailed Maleficent, so startled that he fell over backward. Someone cheered, and Clytie stifled a giggle. Tom just stood staring at his trembling fist and wondering how he had done it. But Maleficent was much bigger and tougher than Tom, and he was already back on his feet. Clytie tried to restrain him, but some other historians were cheering him on, and a group of boys in the green tunics of apprentice navigators clustered close behind and chanted, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Tom knew he stood no more chance against Maleficent than Salthook had stood against London. He took a step backward, but the crowd was hemming him in. Then Maleficent's fist hit him on the side of the face, and Maleficent's knee crashed up hard between his legs, and he was bent double and stumbling away with his eyes full of tears. Something as big and softly yielding as a sofa stood in his way, and as he rammed his head against it, it said, "Oof!" He looked up into a round, red, bushy eyebrowed face under an unconvincing wig, a face that grew even redder when it recognized him. "Natsworthy!" boomed Chudley Pomeroy. "What in Quirk's name do you think you're playing at?"